You'll hear American weather reporters say, this is our Super Bowl.
It's pretty hard to stand out here.
Everything is a ratings war.
We are in the dirty eye of Ian right now.
You watch it in that same way that you watch sort of NASCAR, thinking, we might see a crash now. Hello and welcome to this episode of The Rest is Entertainment Questions and Answers edition. I'm Marina Hyde.
And I'm Richard Osman. Happy to be in the studio. Happy to be answering questions
I'm always happy to be in the studio with you.
Alistair Otto has a question for you. He says, I've always found it curious and perhaps a little ironic, I like where this is going, that major news outlets like the BBC, ITN and Sky send reporters to cover severe weather events from the very locations they warn viewers to avoid. How did news organisations navigate this contradiction? And in your opinion, is it necessary or even responsible for them to report from such hazardous locations during extreme weather events?
This question in itself has become a classic over the years because where all this started was in America, and the type of news reporting they do in America, which was always much more brash and show busy. And you'll hear American weather reporters say, this is our Super Bowl, about doing this. And they obviously get a lot. Their relationship with their weather in America was traditionally always very different to ours because, you know, we had sort of climate and they had weather.
Yeah, they got
big
crazy
events,
things happening all the
huge
time.
things happen. It's a big deal. Everything is a ratings war. And I have to say to you that people want to watch this. You watch it in that same way that you watch sort of NASCAR, thinking, we might see a crash now. People want to see reporters in those situations. Reporters want to do it because it's a great way, as I say, it's their Super Bowl. It's a great way of getting attention. Storms are content. You know, storm chases is a big, big thing. Someone I haven't mentioned for way too long on this podcast, Glenn Powell played one in Twisters last year.
Glenn
Yeah,
Powell.
Sorry, I don't know why I haven't mentioned Glenn Powell for a couple of weeks.
So Glenn Powell, I think at the very top table of this podcast, Glenn Powell, Lawrence Sanchez and now James Watt.
And Steven Seagal.
Yes. Oh, and Steven Seagal. By the way, if you don't know who James Watt is, not the man who invented the engine, listen to our Tuesday's episode where we will introduce you to him.
The man who's trying to invent himself as a celebrity.
Storms are content.
Storms are content. There is a sort of fake thing that they say, which I think is rubbish, which is that the networks say that the most effective way to say to people, it's best to stay inside, is to show someone kind of hanging onto an iron railing, dealing with the elements. The Weather Channel, they obviously had a whole channel devoted to this in the States, and when these big storms come in, it's a big deal. There was a guy on the Weather Channel, there's a funny clip from a few years ago, I'm sorry, I can't quite remember the year, one of the hurricanes blowing into Florida, and he is doing this on a little in the foreground of the picture.
When you say, honestly, I do not want to teach you your job in any way whatsoever. And I know that broadcasting is new to you. When you say doing this, for the people on YouTube, they're really enjoying that. Just for people on their dog walk,
okay.
I wonder what it is you were doing.
And looking like he's almost at a 45-degree angle to sort of set himself against the wind in the foreground of the shot. And you just see these two guys strolling past him in shorts in the background of it. So there's a lot of hamminess to it in the way they do it. I think one of the very first people to do it was Dan Rather. Now, Dan Rather, he did it in the 60s, did this kind of outside broadcast way of reporting storms.
And he's now
Dan Rather became the legendary, one of the legendary sort of three anchors of US News, and he was CBS. And Dan Rather was originally, drew a lot of attention, and some people think it helped his rise because it was a sort of new way of doing it.
Yeah.
We've imported it, definitely. And the reason this question is good because of Storm Erin last week, and there was a lot of stuff. You saw a lot of reporters saying, absolutely, you must stay in your house and any wave could come and take you right now while standing really close to the water on a beach.
Yeah.
And we've imported this. Like anything we import from America, it doesn't matter. You could import, and it becomes a way in which to criticise the BBC.
Yes.
It's sooner or later, the argument that the probability approach is one that whatever we've imported will just be a way to criticise the BBC. So people criticising the BBC for putting their reporters at risk, blah, blah. I'm sure they're not really at risk. There is a sort of slightly odd thing that you have to think about, which is the last part of your question was, is it really necessary? A lot of outside reporting of any type, completely unnecessary.
It's not really necessary,
Does Chris Mason need to stand outside Downing Street at night? Does he think the Prime Minister is going to come downstairs and say, I'll tell you what, Chris, I'm just actually watching inside. I don't quite think you've said that right. Can I just give you a little bit of exclusive live on air? There's no reason for him to be there. But it sort of looks better. These backdrops look back, which is why not everything is just done in a studio, because we have to try and break it all up and make it look more interesting and go to the outside areas. But there's a huge amount of reporting has absolutely no need of taking place against the backdrop against it, which it takes place against.
But if they don't do it, we wouldn't enjoy watching it so much.
No.
That's the truth. We are absolutely complicit in that. When they say, we don't need to send people over to here, when people don't need to be in the stadium to watch the football, you think, well, yeah, we don't need to be doing anything.
No.
It's just a good way of doing this. So, we are entertained by it. I think one of the key things to talk about the safety of the thing is if you are sent out to a seaside town by Sky or by the BBC or by ITN, each of them has risk analysts. Each of them has insurance in place. The first thing you do is you're in touch with the emergency services there because you're reporting anyway. So you're talking to the police. You're talking to the authorities. They have a pretty good idea of where you can stand that is going to look good but is safe. And when you say you mustn't go to these places, there are certain places that these news crews would not go, definitively would not be. Sky, the BBC and ITN usually will be right next to each other and their vans will be parked right next to each other, but they will be in a bit where in the background you can see huge waves, but those huge waves are not hitting you. So they are in touch with every single authority in that place. The authorities, by and large, welcome them in because they want you to show that actually it's looking windy, it's looking dangerous. And so they will put you in the right place. The real danger now is people, with their own YouTube channels and things like that. They will stay behind in, places where hurricanes are about to hit. They do not have anyone with health and safety involved. They are not in touch with the authorities. They are not being told where to stand.
If they're Glenn Powell, they've got a thing that can drill his SUV down into the ground in twisters so that he can capture the storm. But it's got this it's like a sort of Bond thing that it can drill the SUV down into the ground so that Glenn Powell doesn't get harmed while making content.
Amazing. The single best bit of extreme weather reporting, of course, is Big Jet TV in the storms where he films people, landing at Heathrow.
Yes.
It's a go around. It's a go around.
We've never seen one taken by the elements.
Yes.
Although it'd be a great inciting incident, wouldn't it, in the first moments of a comedy about running a network news station? If they lose one.
When you lose a reporter.
You lose one. For you, Richard, from Oscar Khan, Gladiators is an enormous production and requires hiring out an entire stadium. How long does it take to film? How long are the contestants around for? And how long does it take to switch sets over?
There's all sorts of shows that you can get tickets for. And I know that tickets for Gladiators are in huge demand as well. There's a huge waiting list for things. But you have to be very careful about which TV shows you go to watch, I would say. Gladiators, which are filmed at Sheffield Arena, that is one that takes a very, very, very long time to film because there's all sorts going on. There's all sorts of different setups there. The games are very different. Every single one of those games has to have incredible health and safety around it. Every single one of those games is shot in an entirely different way. So between every single game you're playing, there are enormous camera moves. There are enormous set moves. People can get injured, you've got an awful lot of different cast members, an awful lot of different setups. You've got Bradley and Barney, you've got the setups there, you've got Mark Clattenburg and setups there, then you've got the games itself, then you've got the interviews after the games. So that is a show which takes forever to film. You're hyped up in between, of course, it's great warm-up people and all sorts going on and prizes and games going on just to keep everybody hyped. So if you're a 9-year-old kid, it's probably like an absolute dream day, I would say. If you're the parent of a 9-year-old kid,
Take sandwiches.
Yeah, you definitely should. So that would be a very, very long one. There's certain shows, if you, in the olden days, used to go and see Pointless, you would just do a 45-minute episode in an hour and there would be like a 2-minute break to move one of the podiums out in between rounds. If you go and see something like Have I Got News For You, it's just like watching, or Would I Lie To You, it's just like watching a long version of the actual show. There's zero camera moves, zero changes, nothing is going on. But anytime you see a show where the set changes, where the camera angles are changing a lot, then you are going to be there for a very, very long time. And Gladiators, which my understanding is an amazing show to go and watch, but it is long.
Yeah.
It is long.
And we've got a question that I really would like to know the answer. I've thought about this often myself. It's about audiobook reading speed. Amy says, am I imagining it, or are people somehow able to read an entire book aloud more quickly than most people could read it in their heads? I look at the running time of most audiobooks and there's no way I could have read the book in that time. Yet the narrator has managed to read it first in their head, then out loud, and sometimes switch voices. Is my theory correct?
Amy, thank you. Your theory is actually incorrect, other than in specific examples. It is quicker to read a book yourself than to listen to a book. I spoke to my audiobook producer, Meredith, who's absolutely brilliant. She talked me through every version of this. She says the average human reading speed for an adult is about 250 words per minute. And so if you're reading a 90,000 word novel, which is roughly how long a novel is, it would take you around 5 to 6 hours to read a book with absolutely zero interruptions, without the phone ringing, without, a delivery. 5 to 6 hours if you're happy just to do it. That's how long it would take you. The average length of an audiobook of 90,000 words is 9 hours. So actually it takes about half the time again to listen to it than it does to read it. So the basic principle is it is quicker for you to read it than to listen to it. However, we all have different reading styles, and if you have any form of dyslexia, ADHD, if like me your eyesight is not what it might be, it will take you significantly longer to read a book. It'd take me a lot longer than 5 or 6 hours to read a 90,000 word book. Audiobooks for me are an awful lot quicker. Meredith talks about all sorts of other things as well, which was great. So a 9-hour audiobook, that is not just Nicola Walker, who does We Solve Murders. That's not her sitting down for 9 hours and reading it all out loud. The recording of a 9-hour audiobook would essentially take 3 to 4 days. It'd be about 18 hours worth of recordings, all sorts of different things. And also, if you're Nicola Walker or lots of other audiobook readers, before the day you go in, you've read the whole thing. You've read the whole thing. Any pronunciations that they've come across that they're not sure of, are raised with the producer. Fiona Shaw, who did the books 3 and 4 of Thursday Murder Club, rang me and asked me about various characters.
Gosh.
She said, I can't believe you've got two people from Liverpool there. I can't do a Liverpudlian accent. She says the one accent I can't do. And so, she'd been through the whole thing and had lots of questions about motivations. And Nicola Walker did the same thing. We had a long chat about the book and about the characters and who I thought they were. If a book is set in a certain area, my books are set in kind of Sussex, Kent, and We Solve Murders in Hampshire, they will ring the local, or the producer will ring the local authority just to make sure of pronunciations of place names, of things like that, like any shops that are mentioned in the thing. So they will ring, they will go to source and ring and get absolute exact pronunciations of things.
I've never listened to an audiobook.
Have you not?
No.
I love them. And Meredith's job, amongst many other things, as the actors are reading, there's retakes, there's pronunciation things, but she's also marking up every single second in which there's a chair squeak or someone's stomach is rumbling or there's a slight pause or anything like that. Every single bit of that is kind of noted before it goes off to the editor. So it's an amazing job. A great audiobook reader. They're not just sitting down and reading the book out loud. They're going into the whole thing. They're reading the whole thing. They're getting into the characters. They're understanding who the characters are. The audiobook producer is just making sure that the whole process is kind of as seamless as it can be. In answer to your specific question, Amy, it is quicker to read a book yourself, but sometimes I think listening to one can be more fun. I'll say thank you so much to Meredith for all those answers, but also for how brilliant she is anyway. This episode is brought to you by NordVPN.
Now, it might be a new year, Richard, but online fraudsters continue with their same old tricks.
I feel you're about to help me avoid some online disasters.
I'm always here to help. I live to serve. And with that in mind, I want to tell you about NordVPN's threat protection.
Threat protection? It's not, the first Steven Seagal movie. Threat protection 2.
That could be his comeback. He doesn't necessarily need a comeback, but yes, once again, we are claiming copyright here on this podcast. Anyway, many ransomware attacks start with phishing emails or malicious websites. By encrypting your data, NordVPN can protect against certain types of attacks. Threat protection reduces the risks of accidentally downloading ransomware from malicious links or even from ads.
As does threat protection 2. I think I speak for everyone when I want to thank you, Marina, and NordVPN for keeping our data safe online.
Yes, I am a huge part of it, but you can keep your family's data safe too, as one NordVPN account can be used across 10 devices.
To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/TRIE, and our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan.
There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and it only costs the price of a cup of coffee a month. The link is in the episode notes.
Marina, Lisa Turley has a question for you. We're back on the news. When someone from a news agency or newspaper, etc., appears on a current affairs programme and does a 5-minute interview on a story of the day, do they get paid, or is it all in the spirit of a mutually beneficial news cauldron?
I love the news cauldron. That it is a witch's brew, isn't it? Yeah. The answer is that mostly they do get... We're talking about sort of talking heads, aren't we here? Pundits.
Yes.
We're not talking about someone doing a shift covering the... Yeah, okay. Well, there is a sort of price list for these things. I can do you some prices.
Yes, please.
So if you're going on something like Question Time or Any Questions, those are proper programs. Any Questions being on the Radio 4, those are proper programs. They have a whole big budget. They're providing like an hour or whatever of airtime, so you get a proper fee for that, which would be probably in the low thousands. For things like just turning up on radio to talk, if you think of like during the Brexit wars when we had permanent news encampments out on College Green in Westminster, and people were constantly journalists were always on. You get about £50 or £75 for going on BBC News or radio or TV. Okay, I think that journalists do this only for what I would call brand building.
Yeah.
I personally don't do it because I think it takes quite a long time, and I'm not interested in like brand building. But anyway,
you're not interested in brand building?
No, why?
No, well, listen.
I wouldn't want to do. No, I don't want to go and talk about the news.
That's the ultimate brand, though.
Is it?
Someone who's not interested
in brand building. But I already do my column, so that's enough. If there's anything to say,
the thing about
it's
Marina
in there.
Hyde is she's not interested in brand building. It's such a unique take.
Silence being the most intriguing statement of all. No, it's not. It's just laziness and not being interested in that sort of thing. But if you want to go and do the Sky News paper review, you do get asked a lot of these things, and it's sort of like, do you want to come out to Isleworth and do it for £75 on a Sunday evening?
So, yes, absolutely, to build a profile.
It's to build a profile.
There's plenty of people who started doing shifts on, Sky News, reading the papers a couple of times, and then a producer goes, "Oh, they're pretty good," and they bring them back in for something slightly bigger.
My parents are always they obsessively watch these and always say to me, "Now, tell them about saying because we watch her on the paper review," and I'm like, God, I mean, it's a really big thing. So it is a big thing. Expert guest, you might get 100, 175,000. Sorry, let me start again.
I mean, you have to be ahead of an expert.
Expert guest, you might get 100, 175 pounds. The one thing I would say is that there are times, as I say, I was talking about those Brexit wars. There was also a period, if you remember Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, where he didn't have a whole load of, I don't know, the political editor of the Mail or whoever to talk about on your behalf, of a right-leaning paper, if you were a Conservative leader. They didn't have any of those. And they had, so a whole sort of class of journalists sprung up who were sort of the media outriders for Corbyn.
Who could talk about Corbyn, what he's thinking.
They were sort of unofficial spokespeople. And you could get, if you're getting 10 appearances a week and you're going between the different broadcasters who are encamped on College Green, you could be earning easily £750 extra a week. So it adds up. Once it can add up, because there's just the scale of it, because we were in political turmoil and news was big business. But then, of course, when Jeremy Corbyn went, having lost the second election, the little appearance fees can add up to quite a lot if you're in political turmoil. But if it's just normal, we haven't had normal political times to some extent, or this is our new normal, then you're really doing it for profile building, because you can't get the scale enough to get it up to a sort of reasonable sum. But the profile building may be worth much more. Yes,
worth a lot more. I mean, and listen, but we haven't even got onto whether they send a car or not, which is a whole different question.
Oh, that's a whole thing. Yeah. Will you send a car? Yes. Will you, but as I say, you go, if you're doing the studio things and then you're doing the hair, you have to do the hair and makeup and all these things. It becomes a long time. If you're going out to a sort of, it's several hours.
It's also fun. It's fun though.
If that's what you want to do, then it's brilliant fun and it's profile building. But if you're not interested in doing that, then it's a lot of time out of the schedule, in my view.
And you can get your hair cut.
Oh, you get yours cut, which I find hysterical.
Well, because I need it cut at the moment is the truth, and I'm thinking, well, when am I next on a TV show? Because they've
got hairdressers. On almost every high street.
Hairdressers.
Yeah. You can go into one of those.
But I'm a multitasker.
Yeah, you are, you see. Just making time, carving extra time carving 26 hours out of every day.
Exactly.
Question for you from Natalie Richard. When a band is coming up with a name, is there a list of already taken names they have to consult? Or can bands have the same name? If a band name's already been used, are there any instances of them buying that name off another band?
Any version of what you're asking there has happened and can happen. It's interesting because if you set up a company, there's trademarks and copyrights, and you can't call yourself something, which is why all new companies essentially have made up, like Accenture and stuff. I mean, people just have made up names because all the actual normal names have...
American Riviera Orchard.
Yeah, exactly. Just put three words together and it works. So yes, often a band, a new band will come up and suddenly they'll start, making waves, and another band will immediately say, we've already got that name. It happened to Suede, funnily enough. My brother's band, they were big in the UK and they went over to America, and there was a jazz singer who was called Suede, and she issued legal proceedings. So in America, Suede are known as the London Suede, and always have been, because there's a jazz singer called Suede already. So it happens an awful lot. Blink-182 were originally called Blink, but when they came over here, there was a Dublin band already called Blink, so they call themselves Blink-182. The 182, by the way, comes from, it's the amount of times Al Pacino says the F word in Scarface.
I did not know that.
That's where that comes from. Yeah, 182 times. Did a show many years ago called Whatever You Want, I think it was called, where you won the chance to sort of win your dreams. Gabby Roslin hosted, and one of the first guests we ever had were an Irish boy band called West Side, and by the time it had gone out, they'd had to change their name from West Side to Westlife because there was already a band called West. Because if you think about it, Westlife, that's a weird name, and it's because they were called, West Side originally. The Chemical Brothers were famously, when they started, they were the Dust Brothers, which they used as an homage to the Dust Brothers, the American production gang. They had to change to the Chemical Brothers.
Their album was called Exit Planet Dust. The next one.
Yes, exactly that. For exactly that reason. Little Mix as well. I think when they were originally put together on X Factor, they were called Rhythmics. And Jordan Stevens, I think, from Rizzle Kicks, he said there's a charity in Hastings already called Rhythmics, so Little Mix changed. It was a better name, I think, Little Mix. Yeah. The better version of that is One Direction, which is sort of weird and terrible name. One Direction, because when they were put together, genuinely the first name that was had for them was New Direction.
Yes.
Which is new direction, that's fine, but nude erection is not great.
No.
So they become a One Direction again, but that's not because another band was called it, but they had a name that sounded rude. But yeah, it happens.
In Spinal Tap, they used to be called the Originals, so then there was another band with that name, so they had to be called the New Originals.
Yes, exactly. So it happens a lot. If you come up pretty much any band name, the Arctic Monkeys were named after Alex Turner's dad's band, who had been called the Arctic Monkeys many years before, and they just said, well, we'll have that name. But yeah, lots and lots of bands have got the same name as previous bands. There's sort of not an official database. I guess you could call yourself Oasis if you really wanted to, but any band that's big has got lawyers and will stop you doing it, and they are allowed to stop you doing it as well. Let's finish with this, Marina. Andy Campbell says, I always loved Charlie Brooker's Screen News Games Wipe, but there is nowhere to watch it. Why doesn't iPlayer have an enormous archive of every show they've ever broadcast?
Oh, well, yes, I also love it. It's two things. First, if it's older than that and it's solely owned by the BBC, it's because it costs money to digitise. But in general, it's a rights issue. When you commission a show from a production company, you do it under terms of trade, and it means the production company owns the bulk of the rights, and after a certain amount of time, it reverts to them. And that will have happened in the case of various wipes. iPlayer is genuinely huge now, and there is a lot on there that you don't see, and they're going to improve personalisation, which I think will help people discover more what's actually there. There used to be this brilliant thing, which because my husband works at the BBC, and there used to be this thing called Redux, which I absolutely loved, which he had a password to, which was literally everything that had been on terrestrial TV since, I think, about 2000. Every single thing that had been on. So you could call up any single show and think, what was that weird thing they showed? And
students can get it as well. If you're a student, there are ways that you can access that archive
Redux
as well.
no longer exists, but the BBC archive, which goes back decades. Digitising things is really expensive, but they're progressively digitising everything they have the rights to. So you can, like the other day I was watching Ben Elton had done I was thinking he'd done a comedy lecture. And it was a sort of keynote address kind of thing that Shane Allen, the former head of BBC Comedy, had got him to do. And I think I talked to him about it after because it's brilliant. You should have a look at it. It's on. You can watch it. But I said, oh, how come no one else did it? And he said they did ask a lot of people afterwards, but no one. He had a real take, and it's really, really good. It's really worth watching.
He's amazing talking about comedy.
Oh my God, I went and saw him the other week, and it's so good.
I hear his new show is amazing.
It's absolutely, fantastic. He's so good. I can't say enough good things about him. I think he's brilliant, but it's really interesting, and there is so much on iPlayer that we can all discover, and it's going to become easier to.
Great.
They're going to do much more personalisation to sort of help you.
Yeah, some of the old documentaries.
You
on
love.
There
I mean, some of the things you see, you've told me about. I mean, there's millions of sparks of gold in there,
but not Charlie Brooker's Screen Wipe.
but no. regular listeners and students of Kinky Monk literature may remember that one of our questions last week concerned a book about a kinky monk, which the Thursday Murder Club is mentioned in that book. But what got me really hot under the collar was your speculative... Yeah. Was your speculative description of the commissioning process for how this monk, a former Hellraiser, how his ex-boyfriend, now a magazine writer, turns up and ends up, how he becomes part of the plot. For the benefit of those listening orally, for the benefit of the tape, I am Sierra Simone.
People listening orally.
Okay.
Sorry, have you read too much of this book? Yeah.
I've read a lot of this book.
There's a monk who used to be like a millionaire playboy. He goes over to Europe, and then his former lover...
He's at Kansas monastery. Listen, do you want me to take it over from here?
Just said his former lover comes over to do a magazine article. Your only comment, which was about 25 minutes or so, who on earth would commission this article and send this journalist over to Europe? You have read the book now, or some of it?
Yeah, I don't know if you know, I'm an investigative journalist, and it's really important to me. So I have read the Kinky Monk book, or up to the bit where your book is mentioned. Anyway, let's put it that way. Okay, now I want to just put readers into the picture, put you inside the action, as it were. Aidan is the main character, now Brother Patrick. He's chopping wood, but he's also the monastery's chief financial officer.
Oh, is he? CFO.
Now, he's having a silent day. But anyway, the abbot gives him a choice of being sent to 3 separate Trappist monasteries as research for the brewery. Yes, the monastery's got a brewery. A lot of them do. And it's a sort of a corporate espionage, but ethical. Now, 2 monks then rush in. Aidan's got a visit. Brother Patrick now has got a visitor. He's only a staff writer for Mode. It's Elijah, Aidan's former boyfriend. And I tell you what, he's getting married, and not to Aidan. Well, obviously Aidan's now a monk. Anyway, so then he goes away. So he tells Elijah this news. He comes back a few weeks later, and the abbot says, I tell you what, this guy wants to do a magazine piece for Mode about, he wants to do a retreat with us, and then he wants to write an article about it. And anyway, the article which ends up getting written is called The Eternal Cool of Monks, Beer and Prayer in Some of the World's Loneliest Abbeys.
Yeah, that's good. I would see that as you could imagine that article being commissioned.
Yes, you can actually, and I would probably read it.
Have you withdrawn your objections?
No, I haven't. Your suggestion as to how it happened, I don't think was entirely accurate. However, let me tell you how the Thursday Murder Club gets mentioned, which is how we went down this whole rabbit hole. The magazine writer Elijah, his fiancée, Jamie, he invites his fiancée, sorry, it's a funny sort of retreat, isn't it? He invites his fiancée, Jamie, to the monastery.
No, what, parading him in front of
I don't know, you
Brother
treat this
Patrick.
monastery like a hotel, isn't it? I mean, I would have said that, but anyway. And it's awful for Aidan because Jamie's absolutely lovely. Let me tell you how we know he's lovely. Jamie is as friendly as his smile and his glasses make him appear, and at least 2 times as wholesome. It turns out he doesn't run an 8th grade orchestra. He's a librarian who focuses on senior outreach. He teaches Sunday school at an Episcopalian church and has dinner with his mum and dad every week. His hobbies are hiking, baking and camping, and the last book he read was The Thursday Murder Club, which he's happy to mail me at any time. Oh. So you see, it's used as a signifier of his absolute niceness and wholesomeness.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what happens then. I had to put a wash on.
And then he bent him over the altar. But talk of the Thursday Murder Club made him so horny. You're right. Joyce would love this book. Joyce, oh my God, yeah. This Joyce would absolutely crazy.
Can you do a cat back? A call back? I don't know what they call it.
Oh, that's a really good idea. Oh my God. I'm literally 75,000 words through the next Thursday Murder Club, one at the moment. So I'm not a million miles from finishing, but I can absolutely...
Pretty sure that Joyce might need to just decompress with some kinky monkdom at some point.
I am. There's nothing in that, because if I put it in, people might go and buy it. It's fine. There's nothing it's kind of okay. The politics are okay.
The politics?
But you know what I mean?
Oh
it's
God.
Not,
I can't do another 25 minutes on this. But I want to bench that question and come back to it later. Perhaps off air. Listen, this is a question, isn't it?
But if I put it in my book, it's okay. And if people go away
I mean, as long as you say it's a kinky monk book.
Yes, yeah.
They don't come with 18 certificates.
But it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I might get Joyce to mention it. Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was fun.
That was great.
Yeah.
I enjoyed myself.
We started with Kinky Monks and we ended with Charlie Brooker.
Yeah.
2 very, very different things. Tomorrow, for members, there's a bonus episode all about the best fictional TV detective of all time.
And you can find that and details of how to join the club on Apple, if you use Apple, on our page, and otherwise at therestisentertainment.com.
Otherwise, we will see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.